everything, starting with a roll call. Stephen?
Stephen Crowley's here.
Shannon?
Shannon Phelan.
David is present. Trevor? Just, Trevor, if you could state that you're present.
Present.
Great. Thank you. My apologies for slightly duplicating the beginning of the meeting. A good thing I got someone here with sharp eyes that noticed that. And anyway, just to reiterate the agenda, the action item status update. By the end of January, we did receive all of the status updates we expected to receive. I think there were a couple of committees that didn't give us any updates, but
No.
Across the hall. I think they're across the hall.
so the status report basically says no action for anything that I did not actually receive a report on. But not for lack of trying, I sent reminder emails out to everybody. And again, the action item status update circulated to all the OSRC members and will be posted on the town website as well.
Great.
The annual report, again, we discussed the annual report, reviewed it at the last meeting, found one correction that needed to be made, and we agreed to hold off a formal approval until we get the complete action item status in, which is now in. That's the version that I distributed to the committee. So if anybody has any suggested further revisions to it, now would be the time to mention it.
I reviewed it. Look fine.
If it looks good, then I will call for a formal vote to approve the annual report so I can send that to Cindy so she can get it into the annual report document.
Great.
So is there a motion to that effect?
Motion to approve the annual report of
Second.
the Open Space and Recreation Committee for
Excellent.
2023.
Moved and seconded that the draft annual report for 2023 be approved as circulated to the committee. Any discussion on the motion? Hear none, call for a vote. Stephen?
Aye.
Shannon?
Aye.
Trevor?
Aye.
And Dave votes aye. Motion carried unanimously. So that's all of the business that we really needed to get done. But most importantly, we've got an update on the parcel acquisition project. Matt had sent to us, and I sent around to, I think, everybody on the committee some documents and references to documents. So we've got eventually a complete report from that is the results of all the analysis that Matt and company performed, pretty much scoring all the parcels by the criteria that we previously discussed and agreed on. So Matt,
yeah,
tell us what we have, and we'll end up wanting to talk about where we want to go from here.
Yep. All right, let me do a screen share here.
Let's see.
All right, and then so I'm just basically what I'm going to do is just go over a couple of the documents that were in that folder link that I sent over. Two of them you've seen, they're from the prior one. This first one here, metadata Grafton OS priority. I sent this over to include just so that you could see the steps that we took when we were doing this analysis. Basically, it just runs through and talks about the type of properties and parcels that we were doing the analysis on, and then the actual steps that we took to do each of the scoring on the different criterions. Once we did all these steps and everything, we then got the results and we placed them into this Excel table, the results M110 tax par. And this is made up of a couple different tabs on here. The criteria scores tab is going to look very familiar because it's basically just a copy of the criteria scores. Original Excel sheet that we went over and sort of generated based on our discussion. Where it comes into play here is when you get into the parcel scores tab. So in here, pretty much all the stuff starting at this M110 assess prop ID down to this structure one are all the assessor records that came out of the GIS analysis. So we took all those out, stuck them into this Excel file, and then the rest of the Excel, starting in column AF here, uses that information to basically go through and score each of the criteria. And each of these cells has a different formula that relates to the particular criteria in this section. So the kind of nice part about this is we had talked about at one point, you know, you wanted to be able to go in and sort of, you know, if we want to play with the scoring and stuff like that. So you can actually go in here and change these values, criteria rank, and then these individual rank value scores. And that will then come back into the parcel scores one and change the numbers in here. So, you know, you can make a copy of this, and then if you want to just, you know, do hypotheticals, well, what if we want to make, you know, this have a, you know, a 2 or change the criteria weight on this, you can go ahead and do that, and you can see what kind of impact that will have on the individual scores. And then when you get into the weighted scores, which is all the blue columns here, and then when you go further, you get the final score, which is basically taking a sum of all the weighted scores. And then the possible structures column is just basically a flag that we had discussed about, and it's just marking if a yes if it had a structure on the parcel. And then the pivots table is just something that we put together. You can certainly expand on it. Basically, I just threw 3 quick pivot tables of things I thought you might be interested in. So there's sort of the top 15 score on here. And then there's a pivot table showing unprotected town Grafton land, and it's a score. And then another one showing all the properties, but broken out by the DOR use code that's maintained in the assessor database. So we brought all this in, we did the scoring, and then we took that back out, we put it into the GIS again to come up with this scoring map that you see here. And right now, we're just symbolizing based on 2.5 to 6.25, 6.25 to 950, 950 to 13, and 13 to 19. That's just the scoring that we went with at the time. If there's a different scoring you want to use, not a problem to change that up and modify how it's being symbolized on the map. And then we also labeled where it would fit the actual final score for each of the parcels. So obviously, if you get into the red, it's a little more high priority versus the yellow, which is a little less priority. I should mention in the parcel scores tab here, for the various GIS related records here, it's a combination of assessor records and then the property parcel data. We're not showing all the fields that are part of the MassGIS property parcel data layer. We just kept certain ones that we thought would be of use as you're looking at this data, like the site address, its total value, its fiscal year. That will kind of just give you an indication of, you know, how current is this data at the time. The lot size as maintained by the assessor, its use code, and the owner. And then zoning, and that's the zoning is maintained by the assessor. And the CAMA ID, and that's the unique ID that the assessor maintains for each of the parcels. Once you get into these M110 tax par ones, they're not, you may find them useful, you may not. Object ID is just a unique number that this GIS gives it. Map per ID is similar to property ID in most cases. There are some, there can be some differences. So, let me now go to here real quick. So like down here, you can see 21 Follett Street and, oh, no, sorry, 200 Westboro Road. You can see if I count final scores 4, that means there were, back here on the parcel score, there were 4 assessor records that were in this thing. So most of the part was 1-to-1 parcels, but there are a couple parcels in here where there were additional, more than one assessor record tied to that parcel. Maybe that's a condo situation. Usually it's a condo or townhouse type thing like that.
Yeah, most of those are condos. There's one that's 4 businesses in the same location.
Yep.
The 200 Westboro Road is a bit, that's the Tufts property. And that's a bit of an unusual case because
There's a lot.
portions of that property are assessed as commercial. And the majority of it is assessed as, tax exempt.
I'm glad you brought that up because I noticed that when I was
Yeah.
looking through the file.
Yeah, and Matt, everything that you did in GIS was done on the basis of the tax parcel. In terms of calculating the various, proximities and various other characteristics. But in order to relate a tax parcel to something that you don't have to look on a map to find, that's where the assessor records come in. That gives you the property address and the ownership and the use code. So it's important to relate the tax parcels to the assessor records, but it complicates the thinking about it because some tax parcels, as you pointed out, have multiple assessor records related to them. But
Yeah.
it's the tax parcel that's the actual physical area that we're evaluating.
Yeah. Yep, you're correct. All right, and then so that was sort of that multiple record thing. Loc ID is just basically a unique ID. In this case, we use F, which stands for feet, and then it's just the XY value, and it's how the unique ID that MassGIS set up basically to allow the property parcel polygon layer to connect to the assessor database. So each polygon's got a unique ID, and all the assessor records will have a matching one where they're known. Polytype, that's just a field that indicates what that polygon's representing. So phi just stands for a single parcel connecting to a single assessor record. You might see ones that say tax, and those represent a parcel that connects to more than one assessor record, such as a condo. Last edit, that just tells you like when the parcel was last edited. Town ID, that's every town's got a unique ID assigned by MassGIS. Parcel type, so this is basically going to tell you like why was this parcel selected for this analysis. So, and there can be multiple reasons. In this case, like this top one here, it's a vacant, and it's requested land, a residential land plus 10+, if I remember my categories right. Then we have vacant land, chapter lands. So it basically just gives you an idea of like, why did we include this parcel? And then you have GIS acreage. So it's the acreage of the parcel based on what the GIS software calculated. And then as you get in, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, that the GIS calculation doesn't always match the assessor record for a variety of reasons.
Yeah. Hopefully, you hope it does in most cases, but and
it's usually close, but
yeah. If you have, just speak up if you have something, because I can't, because I'm doing the screen share, I can't actually see if there's any hands up and anything. And then as you get into these next columns, these are basically the criteria columns. So it's these are being used in the rank values and the weighted values when we do the formulas. So basically, this is what came out. These fields are populated as part of the GIS analysis that we did on the tax parcels.
And you're talking about the scores.
Yeah. So each of the criteria, like OS proximity, that would be proximity to other protected open space. So we then, ran through different analysis. Let me go here. So protected analysis, we went in, we coded the records with NA, then we looked from the spatial join on our data to find out, how far are these records, did a frequency, linked all that, and then selected data and basically coded it based on a couple different analysis. And then these get a value in it. And then when you go over to the score, so T1, this was, or the T1.1 corresponds to tier 1, item number 1 in here. So you can see in the formula, it says, well, if it's got multiple POS, the criteria stores, the score is going to come from B10. If it's a single POS, it's coming from B9. And if it's a POS 0.25, apply the score from B8. And then it's similar for the other score ones in here. Any questions so far or anything? Let me close on this so I can see the.
I'm encouraged that it's kind of able to follow along, and the descriptions are evident based on the naming, which is encouraging.
The descriptions in the column names,
Yeah.
you mean, or?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I thought using, you can get complicated in the names, but, I figured, if I do referencing the tier number and then the item number, make it kind of easy to link them back and forth. And the same for the scores, into the weighted scores, you have weighted score tier 1. And that's basically just saying, okay, we'll get the value from score T1 and then multiply it by the weighted score from that tier.
So we were to look at this, want to look at our own adjustment.
Mhm.
If it's declined, we would make an adjustment to the values in the criteria scores.
Yep, you can do it. So you can do, if you want to just adjust the ranked value scores, which if you adjust these values, it would impact the values in the black columns. So like right now, this is 0.75.
Yeah.
Because it's taking it from an abutting property. So, if I change that to a 3, you should go back here and we can see it's now changed all those 0.75s to 3.
Yeah.
And then that will translate over to the final score as well.
Okay, all right, good.
So yeah, you can play around with those numbers and see what kind of impact it does. Or as you're looking at the properties, looking, oh, well, you're noticing certain ones are getting flagged, and you're like, well, maybe if we adjust these numbers, it will shift how that gets flagged on there. And then you can add additional pivot tables if there's categories that you are interested in looking at. Easiest way, when I did most of these, I basically copied one of I think the first one I did, and then adjusted the categories and filters to get the items that I wanted on here. So I'm sure there's other ones. I couldn't think of what other possible combinations might be of interest in the initial piece. And this GIS import tab is just, you can ignore that. That's just used from when we brought data over originally on there.
Yeah, with this, with this discussion about, tweaking parameters, weights and criteria values and everything, and looking at the pivot tables that Matt has constructed, this gets into us thinking about, well, how do we want to actually use this data?
Yeah, well, you look at the top 15.
Yeah.
What's that mean to us?
Yeah.
And then we can evaluate how we want to see those properties show up, and then equivalent properties to that, and have those show up. Maybe that's, the top one is our top 15, whatever meets that criteria.
Yeah, so then there's a lot of ways I think you can slice and dice the data, and even a number of different ways that you might visualize it. I played around a little bit with putting these results back into my GIS, to be able to display. Well, suppose I want to see on a map all of the chapter lands that came out of this analysis, and maybe see it in relationship to our protected open space or the town-owned land, and what Matt showed us in that map was one sort of a comprehensive visualization of the whole results. But there's a lot of different ways, again, depending on what we want to do with this. You know, we can come up with, different, tables of, parcels that meet various criteria. You know, we can come up with different maps to visualize it. There's a lot that we can do with this. And so in that sense, this is not the ultimate end result of what we want to do with prioritization, but this is the data on which we can base further work and further thinking.
Evaluation, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I didn't include it in that original stuff, but I can send you the final scoring data layer too, so that you can have that and put it into your GIS, either at the town or the stuff you have, Dave, on there as well.
Yeah, I mean,
make a note of that.
I took that second tab out of the Excel sheet and put it into my database and put it on a map.
Oh, okay. So I'll send it anyways, just so you have a copy of it on
Yeah,
there.
but more information we have, the better, I guess.
Yeah.
We can be overwhelmed
Yeah,
with data and not know what to do with it.
We get nowhere.
I think the
Chapter lands is a good one. I didn't think of that for the pivot table for some reason. I do a lot of chapter land mapping too, so it's kind of funny that it didn't pop into my head.
the chapter 61, 61A, 61B.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's particularly interesting to us because discussions of whether the town should acquire land most often come up when somebody is withdrawing a parcel from chapter 61. So having a prioritized list that's specifically, here's all the chapter land, these are the priorities. This chapter land is high priority, that one's a lower priority. That helps us to think about whether the town should exercise their option to acquire the land.
Do we have,
this one-
do we have any recommendations or ideas from other towns of what they then do with this? Do we know? Do we have any examples of what they do?
I don't off my top of my head, but I can send a follow-up question to Gabe to see what he knows. I'm not sure what Rutland did after they did their analysis, which it wasn't entirely open space if I remember right, but it was something similar. I guess it kind of depends on like how you want to use this. I think we had talked about at one point, like maybe at the last meeting or whatever, using it as sort of a tool to sort of, get an idea of like what might be sort of high priority ones, but then also use this as properties come up to then like go and look to see, okay, well, where is that is that property in this list, and like how did it score in this analysis, to help sort of guide, I guess, like, is it worth going after? Once you have that as a sort of idea, I think you'd also have to then kind of do some on-site stuff to see, what type of parking potential and other items make it worth, acquiring.
Matt, so
Yeah.
I just wanted to, I think maybe chime in a little bit just to add, like, just for us, just for folks who might not be as familiar with GIS or whatever, and when we're trying to explain this thing, this to the select board, and we just want to kind of boil it down to like, okay, this is the data is fantastic and can be utilized in a lot of different ways, but in like a rudimentary sense, we have like a comprehensive database with the priority criteria and the ranked scores available. So at the very least, you can go like when, for example, when Dave says, well, I'm just going to pick on a random part, 100 Westboro Road comes up for sale or whatever, let's just say it's not, but let's just say that. We can go in and look at, okay, well, we can check the map out and see where it ranked there. If it ranked at all, we can cross-reference that information with the hard data that's in the Excel sheet. That would be probably the the basic application, and then obviously we can create our own maps, et cetera, from there too, based on different goals that we have going forward, but just so it's clear.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then, you know, you can look at a little, you know, you can, like you said, look at that final score, but, and then, but, and like you were saying, you can dive a little bit more in and see, okay, well, like, get the details into what went into that final score. So like, you know, say this is 200 Westboro Road, how random. You know, it was a multiple POS. It contains endangered wildlife habitat. You know, it's environmental protection potential was 35% less. Wells are 50% less.
Right.
You know, there was you know, so you can see kind of more of the detail on what was
Right.
going on. You know, development potential is 75 to 100. You know, that,
Mhm.
you know, that depending on how much of that is a factor in when you're thinking of it. So you can kind of get those little detailed pieces.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is fantastic.
Yeah, one thing before we get further into this is, in a sense, it's a step back for me is to, I would like us to be comfortable that this does reflect what we were trying to do, in the sense of, you know, do the results we see here sort of intuitively match what we would expect? And yeah, there's 1,000, I think I counted when I combined multiple assessor records, the unique tax parcels, there's like 995 in here. And I don't have the patience to go through every one of them and look at how the scoring came out and why it came out the way it did, and does it make sense? But to some degree, I'm interested in looking at a few of these parcels, maybe kind of at random, maybe not quite random, and see did the scoring come out kind of the way I would intuitively have expected. You know, when you do that, there's always going to be some surprises. Things might not always come out the way your first impression would say they come out. But overall, I'd like to make sure that we're comfortable that this system of analysis and the criteria we used are producing results that seem to be generally in line with the kind of thing we would expect. So that's one thing, just sort of, you know, reviewing how this all worked, and does it seem like it worked the way we wanted it to. The other thing that I'll point out, and I mentioned this a while back in one of our previous meetings, that the protected open space data from MassGIS is incomplete with respect to Grafton. And in fact, when I took, you know, the data I have in my latest open space inventory matches up, and there were like 62 parcels that are included in this analysis that turn out actually to be permanently protected, but they're not all listed that way in MassGIS open space. Now what that means is some of the parcels that were identified in this analysis, we've prioritized, come up with a priority value for something that's already fully protected. So it's kind of, you know, didn't really need to be included. But from that angle, it's harmless, because when we get down to utilizing this data, we're not going to use the priority value for a parcel that's already been protected. Right. So that fact doesn't mean we have to go and rework this whole thing. On the other hand, one of our criteria is proximity to open space, and potentially the values used for scoring these parcels are going to be affected by open space parcels that weren't known to be open space as part of this analysis. I don't know what kind of impact, you know, you really don't know how that might affect the scoring here unless you actually run it. But off the top of my head, I'm not sure that, because proximity to open space is only one of several criteria, and because when we look at a specific parcel, we can see, independent of this, we can see if it's right next to some existing open space. So I don't know if the fact that the open space data that Matt used is incomplete, I don't know if that says we need to go back and try to rerun this with more up-to-date data.
I mean, if you want to send me that data, I can take a look at the thing on there. I don't think it would be a huge task to take those missing ones and apply it in here. The interesting, it might be kind of interesting on the ones that were in here, but that you already have protected, just to take a look and see what the final score on those came up, and if it's just to get a sense of how well did it score, compare, since it's become protected now. Was it a high scoring one or moderately low score? Might it'd be an interesting thing just to look at, I think.
Yes. Let's see here. Trying to get my. There we go. I'm just spot checking a few of those and just taking a quick look, the ones that are prioritized but already protected are coming up pretty high.
That's good.
I'd have to look at it in more detail, but
Yeah.
I think probably, I don't know how big a difference it would make to factor that in, but yeah, Matt, I can send you the shape files that I have for open space. And yeah, you can take a look at it. I mean, I've taken a look at it a little bit, and okay, I did not try to get a sense of how the proximity to open spaces be affected by that, but yeah, I don't know. Yeah,
it's hard to tell just by visual sometimes.
Yes, it's hard to tell by visual, but yeah, I'll put my data together and send you a copy of the. Yeah, it's probably. Yeah, I'll put together a shape file for that.
So Dave,
Okay.
we'll kind of work on that, the background, but there was the first point that you had made, that you flagged as a concern. Can you just repeat that? I'm trying to make a note of, trying to write that down and I missed that.
Yes,
So there was a concern about the parcels in this list that are already permanently protected. Concerns with the Mass GIS data being slightly outdated, but you're going to send Matt that information so we can just kind of double check a couple things. And then I'm sorry, what the third thing was?
Yeah, so the first thing I was talking about was sort of reviewing the results of this with an eye towards, does the scoring that it comes up with seem to make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Is it in line with what we were thinking when we put together the criteria, the ranking and the weighting? Does it produce a ranking that seems to be in line with what we would think for various parcels?
I think looking at this document will help with that, because this has all the step-by-step, each of the criterias that we took are there. So that will kind of give you a sense of what did we do for each of these things?
Yep, and what I had in mind, what I would do on my own was just take maybe a few dozen parcels and look at the rank, the final score we came up with and how we came up with that, and does this look kind of right to me for that parcel?
I did a few at home, maybe like 5 or so, just spot checking, especially the ones near my house that I'm most familiar with. And it seems to make sense for me.
Yeah, and that's I just want to we spent a lot of time figuring out the criteria and the ranking and the weighting, and that's all. We think we came up with the right stuff, but when you always kind of want to see the results to, because I've had the experience in the past of coming up with an analysis, maybe somewhat along these same lines. And when I look at the results, there's something that doesn't look right. You know, oh, that's why, you know, but you know, in what I've seen here so far, I haven't seen any red flags to say there's anything wrong here. But I just want to spend more. I haven't had that much time to work on this.
Yeah, no.
But I would, you know, that's just you know, from my own comfort level, I want to make sure that I'm comfortable that this analysis really did do what we wanted it to do.
So Dave, do you think the solution would be to just run a couple, so you'll run some tests and see, and let me know how that works out?
Yeah, basically, I will examine a number of parcels here and look at the final score, look at how it came up with that score, and
Okay.
satisfy myself that, yes, that's pretty much what I would have expected. I mean, sometimes, like I said before, sometimes the final score might not be exactly what, just me looking at the parcel and thinking about it, I would have thought it would score high or low or in between. And the results from this more methodical system of scoring won't always exactly match what my intuition said.
Right.
But if it looks unexpected to me, but I can see that that's actually the correct result,
Right.
I'm comfortable.
I had a perfect example for that, like when I first looked at it, one of the parcels that's very big and that jumped out at me right away was, I was looking at it, I was going, what is that? And then as I looked closer, it's actually the Tufts campus.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right
Westboro
along
Road,
Miller.
yeah.
That's 200 Westboro Road.
Oh, okay, that's the 200 Westboro. Okay, so but logically, it makes sense.
Right.
That it would be
Yeah.
scored that way.
Yeah, so that's the kind of thing that might strike you as a little bit surprising,
Right,
because, but you look at the nature of the Tufts campus, what it looks like, and yeah, if Tufts didn't own it, it would be pretty valuable as
Right.
open space.
right.
But we couldn't afford it at $57.
But there's, yeah, and there will be a large number of parcels that are valuable open space. But there's no reason to think the town will ever be acquiring it.
Right.
You know, I'm thinking another one that sort of leaped out at me was Knowlton's Farm, 44 Estabrook.
Mhm.
And that's chapter land. And, you know, he's actively farming it. He's got a big solar installation there. In fact, that's a very interesting one because he's got solar with active farming
Underneath,
going
right,
on underneath it with livestock and crops. And, yeah, I wouldn't expect the town to ever have the opportunity to acquire that. There's a number of other ones. There's another one that comes out as 21 Follett Street. That was in the high priority in the pivot table, but the town already owns that one.
And yeah, I noticed that one, yeah.
My other question is this is now public record, right? So it can be shared? Because I'm supposed to be representing the land trust, so I was hoping to pass this along to them and maybe they could layer on their parcels of interest to see if they match up. Is that okay, or we don't wanna do that?
If I could just, I think like, for this meeting, I think we're kind of talking through ironing out these kind of last minute kinks to make sure that it is,
Sure.
you know, truly ready to, hit the streets, and then from there, the select board needs to officially approve it. So I'm just, but I think that we could share with the land trust prior to they, excuse me, prior to the select board vote. Sorry.
Okay. So we can share with land trust, just for their information purposes, not to like distribute to the public or anything, but.
Yeah, I wouldn't distribute to the public, right, because it's not fully, you know, ready yet. Davis raised some concerns that we just want to make sure that we're in a good spot before we do that, so.
Yeah, and as part of thinking about what we'll end up, where we'll end up going with this, you know, once we're kind of satisfied that the product here is what we thought, then, you know, one of the questions is gonna be, well, how do we make this information more widely available? In what form? And how many, you know, there's probably more than one way to sort of capture and present this data, or make it useful to everybody who might need to use it or want to use it. And I haven't really thought that through. You know, the Excel sheet as it is, you know, the data's all there. It's not in a form that the general public is likely to be able to consume. But that's a whole another level of thinking. It's, you know, my first concern was making sure we've got the data, and it does and it means what we want it to do and mean. And then and that goes back to one of my first questions. How are we actually going to use the data? And that's partly a question of, well, how do, you know, in what can we present the data, or can the data be presented in a form that's useful? Yeah. And again, going back to the chapter land question is, you know, a list of just, you know, here's a prioritized list of all the chapter land. And that in and of itself is one format that can be useful for those occasions when the town is presented with the opportunity to acquire chapter land. Another useful bit of this information is the town owns a lot of land that is, you know, sort of not protected. It's just the town owns it, and we don't really have any specific idea what to do with it. But here again, the prioritization might tell us that here's some town-owned land that really ought to be protected as open space. So then we can take the steps to do that. And sure, there's a lot of other things. Fiona's, your hand is raised.
Yeah, and I think I just wanted to add to your point, and the points that were made this evening, that it's, you know, I think one of the top ways that I would try and make this data more available and useful is to just make sure that every pertinent board, committee, and department in town has access to it and understands how to use it. And that because different departments get approached at different times, like randomly, like for example 87 Milford Road. So, you know, the town manager in Upton approached myself and the conservation agent specifically asking about, you know, gauging our level of interest in acquiring that, which it's just so happens to rank pretty darn well on this spreadsheet and map, if I'm remembering. But yeah, so it's those instances. It's anybody who needs to be able to look and process that. Oh, okay. 10.7. Yeah, so that would be definitely the foremost way that I would make sure that this would be available and useful. I think obviously we need to kind of think about it more, but yeah, any agency that would ever be approached or would consider purchasing land in town, like, you know, I mean, I think that the Grafton Land Trust could like consider potentially like, you know, using this. And I mean, it would be more for town, but the town staff and boards, but it's, you know, I'm just trying to think of ways to answer that question.
I mean, you could put this onto a web map for, you know, if you're looking to do sort of ease of access that anybody could get to.
Matt, can I just ask you, so I know I keep saying this to you, but do you know how Rutland utilized this? Or should I just ask Gabe?
See if I have anything in my notes. I'm trying to think. I know we based it somewhat off of Rutland, but I can't remember if Rutland I don't think they were exactly the same on there and sort of what they were using it for. Again, because there was kind of an agricultural priority project
Yeah.
on there. But yeah, I mean, I made a note. I can have Gabe follow up.
Yeah, just like
on
how
that.
they disseminated, the information and kind of made it more accessible to the public.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different categories. So I think that's part of too is figuring, like you were saying, like what do you want to show the public? In terms of like, if you're doing the chapter lands, well, maybe you'd have it as a map layer, but just so that you can turn on and off just the chapter land pieces, and they can access the attribute information behind that.
Right.
Or maybe it's just, you create the pivot table of that chapter and you post that onto the website, listing like here's the address and the parcel ID and the final score in terms of like what we came up with. I mean, I guess part of it.
Just as an, I'm sorry, go ahead, man.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, I know with some towns, like especially in like the open space action plans or whatever, there's some hesitation about like pinpointing parcels. And just that some people might start thinking like, oh, they're gonna try to get this parcel, or so I don't know like if there's that piece to it too, like if you want to flag like a smaller subset or keep it at the broader one, so you're not really like, if that's even an issue or something to think about.
Like it's a tool that can be used kind of reactively when somebody approaches the town about interest in selling, but also proactively so the open space recreation committee and associated groups can evaluate and consider opportunities going forward.
Yeah, speaking of chapter land, one thing to keep in mind is that chapter land comes and goes. That is, it doesn't, I don't, as far as I know, it doesn't happen often, but every year there is a few changes in chapter land from the assessor's office, and people will put their land into chapter 61 or will remove it without converting it, so that there's a way that we ran across this recently on the planning board, that there's a piece of land that they removed it from chapter 61 status without converting it or changing its use, which means the town doesn't get the right of first refusal. So that chapter 61 designations can change, which is an issue for keeping this data up year to year. Also, tax parcels change. Sometimes they get divided or they get combined. So this data is best understood as kind of a snapshot and point of time, and we have to think about the extent to which we have to put some energy into keeping it up to date.
Yeah. So I mean, you could certainly the process is established and everything. So I mean, you could certainly do a rerun of it like every X amount of time if you wanted. You could also, you'd have to give it some more thought, but you might be able to do something just with the Excel side of it to, I mean, obviously if something goes out or gets purchased, it's easy to remove from it or cross it off, but and you'd have to give it some more thought, and the Excel could be adjusted on there, but it's, with the steps done, it's pretty easy to do a rerun on the model every now and then.
This whole thing was, it's basically can be reproduced. I mean, it was, you thoroughly documented the steps that you took to combine all the GIS information into these various criteria. So that's helpful. I've made the mistake occasionally of putting a lot of work into some calculations or mapping or whatever, and then not remembering how I did it.
Yeah. I've run into that, especially if it's something you don't come back to after a fair amount of time. It's very easy to forget. one thing we didn't really look into this, and we've mentioned a couple times now, is chapter lands. So if you were to do like a model rerun at some point, I would wonder if it'd be worth like thinking like if chapter land should have, I don't know necessarily if its own, if it should have a criteria in one of the tiers or some kind of like special point value. Or maybe it's just a flag thing like the structures one on there.
Yeah, I think at least to the extent that I've looked at this and thought about so far, chapter land, the fact that something is chapter land doesn't necessarily change its potential value as open space. It's just sort of, if it's chapter land, that means something for the town's potential opportunity to acquire it. But I'd have to think about it more, but off the top of my head, I don't think the fact that it is or is not chapter land is a score, enters into the scoring criteria.
I would agree that it's a
Yeah.
flag.
Yeah, and just as sort of an example of what you can do and how you can look at this, I've got something here. If I can share my
stop.
screen.
It's definitely got a lot of like, I think,
Yeah.
interesting uses and sort of like looking and reviewing the different
Yes.
like combinations in there.
Yeah, so what I've
Dave
got
and all
here,
of them said.
what I've got here is all the chapter land. I've just, I basically filtered the prioritization to show only the chapter land. And this is just, it's interesting that there's that big red chapter land in there. That's the Knowlton Farm, which I mentioned earlier. There's a few smaller red, which are the high priority chapter lands. There's some orange, medium priority chapter lands. It gets maybe a little bit more interesting when you look at, I've just added the protected open space to this display. So you can kind of see
On a protected space.
see that there, where the chapter land is adjacent to protected open space. So that's just one example of different ways you might visualize this.
Yeah, you can play with the layers and, get a full picture.
Yeah, and if this is all of the prioritized parcels with the protected open space on top of it. And that's just, again, that goes back to just the chapter land. So that's, and this particular thing, what I've included in this, it's probably hard to see it. This is only sort of a work in progress. But this thing that I've included in this layer, the criteria, the various criteria, but it's got the final score in here, and it's sort of something I threw together. But to make this more understandable, I would put a little bit more detail into these various factors, like single protected adjacent to a single protected open space. So what's the score for that? I was starting to think about how to present all this scoring data in a format that's sort of easy to understand.
Yeah, I think that's something that I would definitely reiterate, because when we present it to select board, planning board, et cetera, us GIS nerds will get it, but.
But there's point is there's any number of ways you think about to view and think about the data in various different contexts.
I was thinking at one point it could be an interesting map. You'd have to look to see if scaling wise it would work. But if you we've done some public safety maps where we've done like a large scale map and then put smaller mini maps in this one big layout of in that case the state showing different layers. So I was thinking it would be kind of an interesting mapping project with this one is to do large size 36 by 44 map, or maybe a little even bigger, individual maps in there showing the different, each one showing like each of the tiers, color coded based on, you know, the ranking values in there. So you have this one giant map, but it, you know, has all the individual components on it. You can kind of get a look at what all the stuff that's going on that went into the ranking of it, sort of similar to what you were thinking of, Dave, but all on the one map. It would, you know, you'd have to take a look to see, you know, can you get enough detail on it? But it would be an interesting map, I think, to see something
Yeah.
like that.
There's a lot of information here, and when you have a lot of information, it's a challenge to find a way to present that's useful for people looking at it, and that really involves understanding, oh, why are you looking at this? What do you want to learn out of this? You know, and the presentation varies a lot depending on what you're trying to do with it.
May I say something?
Yes.
I think it would be very helpful for me, I know, probably for other people on this committee, to know that when we're making the decision about how to present it, it'd be helpful to know who those key players are, and like who in our town is looking out at the real estate, you know, it has their eye on the real estate, who's responsible for acquisition, and maybe talking with those key people and saying, how can we present this to you that would be useful? Because I don't really have an understanding, like a flow chart of the process.
Right, you know, that's a very important part of thinking about presentations. Who is the audience, and what,
Right.
again, who's looking at this? Why are they looking at it? What do they want to know?
Right.
Right, and I think just to circle back to what I was kind of hinting at earlier is I think you know, the select board, TA's office, planning, Concom, open space and rec committee, like those groups that have a say. Well, a select board ultimately make the final decision, right? But there's a lot that goes into that. There's like letters of recommendation that, you know, departments and boards write to the select board to support purchasing a parcel, et cetera. So I think, yeah, making sure that this is in front of all the correct people, they know how to use it, and it's also continually referenced. Like it's always being used as a resource. And I'm just trying to think of ways, Dave, that I can try and internalize how we can keep this data updated, because we have a contract with MapGeo for the town GIS, and they're always looking, you know, for strategic, you know, planning initiatives and new projects and things like that. So I'm wondering if we can merge this effort with what we pay them to do anyway, and try and, you know, bring it kind of full circle so that we can have continuously have this as a resource at all times. And we know that it'll be regularly updated with the correct information.
Yeah, this is one of those things that, you know, it took a fair amount of work to produce this.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of reminded me of the work I did 3 years ago on the open space inventory, where, you know, we had an inventory from our 2007 open space and rec plan, and nobody was tasked with keeping that up to date. So I basically had to go through and rebuild that. I mean, you know, that was a good starting point, but there was a lot that didn't get put in there. I spent time digging through registry of deeds records, town meeting records, to try to ascertain, you know, what's protected, what's not, what does the town own, what does the town not own, you know, and yeah, I kept track of everything I did, and I've been updating that about once a year since then to try to keep it up to date. But you know, it's one of those things, and this is much the same thing, that it does change from year to year, and it's not enough. It's not enough to put all the work into creating in the first place. We have to have a plan for keeping it up to date.
Yeah, it really should be like a staff level. Like, obviously it's great, Dave, that you do that, but I think it really should be like, you know, because that's a lot of work, right? To expect you to have to do, and if we're already paying somebody for a GIS, we can definitely fold this in. You know, I think that this is awesome. And I'm even thinking about like the web map and what we can do. My mind is going, but yeah, I think this is great. And I would, maybe we can just take some time to kind of, Dave, maybe you and I can sit down and just kind of beta test this, go through some of the concerns that we have, or we can, you know, or happy to do it in a format that works for the committee. Before the next Open Space and Recreation Committee meeting, and work out some of those kind of smaller kinks.
Yeah.
And then we can talk about, talk about more seriously, making sure that the right people know how to use this and have access to it.
Yeah, and I've only barely begun thinking about what we have here and what we might be able to do with it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. There's so much we can do. It's a problem. It's a good problem.
Yeah.
There's a lot of data to sit there,
And
try to make sense of it.
of course, when it comes to visualizing it on a map, I've got the GIS software on my computer and I can do all sorts of stuff with that, but that doesn't help anybody else.
Fiona,
Yes.
this might be another good one if you are getting towards the end of the fiscal year, if you've got a bunch of LPA time when you're left, you know, that in future
Yeah.
ones, like if you've got a bunch of that, this might be a good project to use some of that LPA
Yeah,
time
that's what I'm
towards as well.
thinking. Yeah, that's a good point, Matt. I was actually thinking of that. I was like, I wonder if I should apply for more DLTA, or
You
I know
could
we have some
certainly,
LPA hours. So.
yeah, I mean, if you've got something in terms of next step you want to do with it, we could certainly look at that as another DLTA project. I mean, this one was done under that, so
Right.
I'm sure doing a second round would be, or at least would hopefully be a one that the committee would approve, but
Yeah, I'd say so. So, okay.
awesome.
Awesome.
So does this seem like, will this be going to that February 20th meeting, or what is your thinking on that?
So I don't want to speak for the committee, but I do think that just allowing ourselves a little bit of time to
Okay.
run the model, and then maybe we can circle back one more time and then go from there. Because this is,
Sure.
is the first time that we've seen all of the complete and final products without being able to kind of play with it. So I think
Yeah.
if we do that, and then hopefully that'll be on the next select board agenda after our next Open Space and Recreation Committee meeting.
Yeah, that's totally, it's whatever you guys want to do. I just wanted to
Mhm.
check in just so I could let Will know whether or not it was something that he should keep on his calendar or not. So
Sure. And
whatever
I'm
you
trying
want
to
to
be
do.
cognizant of meeting creep, because I know that we only have a certain, amount of certain scope, and I don't want to overdo it too much. But yeah, I think maybe just like giving the committee time to play with it, and then that would be helpful.
Yeah, and I think there's, a couple of our committee members at least who couldn't make the meeting tonight, who I'm sure would be delighted to have an opportunity to talk about this. Everybody in the committee has seen the material that we sent out, but it's helpful to be able to talk about
Talk
it
about
amongst
it, yeah,
ourselves.
it's a lot to digest individually.
Can I ask this group, I believe I got an email from, maybe it was Fiona, about an MCA, Land Conservation Alliance meeting at the end of February. It's specifically about land prioritization projects.
Yeah.
Was that from you, Fiona?
That might have been, I got that email too, but I don't think that I disseminated it. I think Jan and Concom did.
Okay,
Yeah, I think I forwarded it to the other.
Yeah,
members of
okay,
this
you
committee.
did.
okay. Is
Yeah.
anyone to that, or should we go to that? Should somebody?
It
So
would
I was
probably-
thinking about it, but I'm not sure, just because it is kind of hectic. So I forwarded it to Dave and asked him if he was thinking of going, but.
Yeah, and I haven't decided whether I want to go. It did strike me as something that would be of interest to us.
Yeah,
And so it probably wouldn't hurt if one of us or more than one of us went.
okay. I have it in my calendar, but if other people are going, I might just defer to them, but yeah. I would love it if somebody went.
Yeah, I think I should probably be able to make that work if I hear from somebody. If nobody else is able to make it, I'm gonna try and make it work. I do have I'm trying to schedule meetings not in that time frame, so hopefully that will work for me. I'm a tentative right now. I know this would be kind of cool to be able to talk about this project at that event.
Yeah, because it does sound like it's very much in line with what we've just been talking about.
Okay, yeah. So Matt, if that sounds okay to you, and if this sounds okay to the committee, we'll take the next month, play around. I'm happy to meet with any open space and recreation committee members. I don't know if it makes sense to disseminate this internally, similar to what we were talking about earlier with maybe sharing with the land trust and seeing if, if it's maybe too soon for that. I just don't want to I don't want to send anything out if we're still, working on
I'm
beta
happy
testing it.
anything until you give me the word. That's totally fine.
Yep, I'm not expecting that anything we do is going to dramatically change what we're seeing here.
Okay.
I mean, never say never. I've occasionally been surprised at how big a change something that looks really small is. But my intuition is that what we're talking about continuing to sort of what's the word? There's basically two things we talked about that sort of potentially would be changing how this works a bit. One is to include up-to-date protected open space data, and the other is to sort of reviewing the results to see if they seem to make sense to us. And
Yeah.
I don't expect that either of those are going to dramatically change what we have here.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think I think we just need to give ourselves, Dave, I know you have data you want to share with Matt, and then, give ourselves that time. And then, I mean, I don't think it will significantly alter, what we've seen, but we could find something. And we just want to make sure that it's foolproof before we close it out. So, okay, that sounds good. I think, we have a good game plan. Matt, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, does it make sense to share it with at least those target audiences that you were talking about, like the purchasing people or
Yeah.
I forget all the ones that you mentioned, but that one?
Yeah, I'm reluctant to share with the select board who do make final decisions on, purchases, because I can tell you that they will have more questions than that might be a little early, but
Yeah.
I would be
I was sorry, I wasn't thinking select board. I didn't I just thought there were somebody mentioned
like
purchasing, so I was
assessing
just
and
I was just thinking like there were other like
mhm.
lower target ones. I didn't know if like sharing it with them might generate some feedback that make you think about.
Mhm.
I don't, like I said, I don't think it will make any big changes like Dave said to the thing, but just whether it would like give you some additional thought and like
Yeah.
taste or something like that.
I think that would be a bit more along the lines of what Shannon was talking about with, the folks who might be wanting to use this information to get a sense of what they would be looking for in terms of helping them make decisions or recommendations about. Again, this is either acquisition of land or protection of land. It's not just buying land that's at issue here.
Right.
It's a little bit more than that. It's land that maybe we ought to be protecting that's not now protected. And there's a potential of acquiring land for recreation purposes, which is something that your recreation folks, you might have particular ways that you need to look at data in order to think about acquiring recreation, either purchasing it or just acquiring the rights to use it for recreation. So I think that kind of gets to the question of the potential audiences for this. People who could use this information, how might they use it? What might they need to see in order to help them? So it's probably not
Oh,
too
sorry,
soon to-
Dave.
It's probably not too soon to start socializing it with the other folks in town who might find this information helpful.
So I
Okay.
propose that I share it, or Shannon rather, on our behalf, share it with the land trust. I'm gonna share it with Concom because I think that they need to take a look. Assessing and rec. I'm trying to think of boards now. I think that that's probably a good place to start, and then we can give them a deadline to get us feedback by. With enough time to kind of digest that before the next open space and recreation committee meeting. And yeah, I don't mind being the point of contact for gathering all those, sending that information out and kind of gathering the comments and compiling them as part of the meeting materials for the next meeting. If that makes sense for everyone else.
Yeah, seems to make sense, and I think the caveat there is that just showing them the map and the spreadsheet we have, it's kind of daunting.
It is daunting. What is Adam from Rec going to do with it when he's looking at, these are my land needs, but how am I digesting 1,000 pieces of land?
Yeah, so we wouldn't be asking folks to review, 1,000 rows on a spreadsheet and all the numbers that are in there. It's a bit more, and you kind of get an idea of what we've got here. If this sort of information could be helpful to whatever, Adam, for instance, if what kind of things might Adam be looking for in thinking about acquiring
And
recreation
and
land?
working with this committee to, well, what land is available? And then let's talk about that land and how do we acquire it, if we acquire it at all.
So that, again, that's a question of who's going to use this information.
Right.
And what parts of this information would they find helpful? And how to look at it. And again, the map I showed was, here's the chapter land in relationship to the protection open space we already have protected. Yeah, is that even helpful?
Right.
And maybe it's not. I don't know, but there's so many different ways you can think of looking at this, and if we do nothing more than get some other people started thinking about how they might be able to use information like this.
What do they need it for?
Yeah.
And that's one of the actions that the recreation department has, is planning for
Yeah.
what's future use of recreation. What's the future use for land to support the mission of the recreation commission?
I mean, one of the, and sorry, jump in. Just messing with it right now is it's set up as a table format, so you can do multiple filters within that Excel on there. So that's kind of like one use that you can use it for too, like, so like I just filtered this thing based on multiple POS and contains EWHs, but you could apply that to all of these. So, it's a quick one, I guess I'll say simple, but, way to sort of like shrink that data down to, like specific things that maybe people are looking for, if what they're looking for is within one of these fields. But
Yep, that's one of many ways.
Yeah,
Remember saying there's a lot of different ways to slice and dice this, but that particular format, the Excel sheet where you can select the certain characteristics of interest and narrow it down to a set of parcels that's actually manageable, that you can wrap your mind around.
Adam is new to using as an example. He hasn't seen this data before. He doesn't even know what we're doing.
right,
So throwing it his way is like, what am I supposed to do with that?
yes,
And I can, how am I gonna sort this? What am I looking at?
Mhm.
yeah, it's one thing to know, and, you know, it's sort of, yeah, to use this ultimately, you have to kind of know what's there.
Yeah.
But then knowing what's there, then the next step is, of everything that's there, what am I actually interested in?
Yeah, and I think I can definitely run interference there. And we're all in the same, you know, like for Adam, for example, you know, I see him regularly and I can just explain to him in a meeting, this is what it is, break it down for him and, you know,
Yeah.
meet with him for 30 minutes and say, you know, this is what you can do, this is what you can view. What do you think? And how do you think you would use this tool?
And give
And
me
how
an
would-
example. He
Sorry.
says, this is what I'm looking for. And then
Mhm.
you can show how to filter on what's
Right,
there to address
right, that
that.
might be the better way to do that.
And you may also discover potential, maybe not criterias, but flag things for like a future run. Like there might be something that he would find useful. There's data for it, but it's not part of this right now. But it could be added as in a future run as another flag item
Mhm.
or criteria if it happens to meet a criteria piece for that. But
Mhm.
That's kind of an important point, I think, is that, you know, we did the best we could to identify the important criteria to use here. But indeed, once, again, this has often been my experience, that once you get started with something, you know, you put it together and you realize, after you've been using it for some time, you realize, well, there's something more that we ought to do with this. That's it. This is not, you know, this is fortunately, it's kind of, you know, flexible. That, we could add criteria, we could change the way things break. Now, there's a lot that we could do with this.
I look at analysis a lot. Somebody comes to me with a problem and they tell me what they want. And I look at the data and tell them how they can have it. So that's why I use Adam again, an example. Adam, what do you want? Okay, let's look at the data and I'll show you what you can have. So he's not starting from scratch.
Yeah,
We're giving him options. It's customer support, really. That's what I'm sure Adam's gonna be looking for. He's not gonna dig through all the data to come up with those all in parcel of purchase.
So let me work on that in the meantime, and be able to try and get some of that information from Adam, from Tammy, so from you know, department heads that are working with, you know, working with the data and you know, would heavily use this type of information amongst other groups. And see, you know, what we come up with, and then we'll work on the other items in the meantime. And go from there. If that sounds like a plan.
Yeah, that sounds like
Yeah.
a plan. Yeah,
Okay,
very good.
great. Alrighty, so Matt, I just want to ask you before we kind of wrap up the discussion, I think, you know, does that, would you be able to maybe go through this one more time with us at one more meeting in March? Or do you think, or, because I would actually kind of personally, once we're ready to present the deliverables to the select board, I think that's probably where I would rather, if you, like, I don't know where you're at with meetings and the scope of work, and if we're like exceeding it, I know that we probably have technically already, but, I don't wanna, you know, I need to be cognizant of your capacity and what you can and can't do, so, you let us know.
Yeah, I think I could do one more. I think I would imagine it'd probably be a little, wouldn't be as
Mhm,
lengthy or whatever. So,
mhm.
yeah, I think that would be fine just to kind of go over this similar thing, just briefly go over the step doc and look at the Excel and the map or whatever.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, if I had to, you know, offer my opinion up again, which I will, is I think, you know, the committee can let me know what they think, but I think using, you know, having Matt present at that select board meeting when they approve this material would be the preferred situation, but I don't know what everyone else thinks.
Are you gonna want us to do a similar presentation at the select board one, or is that
Well,
something
I'm
you
just
guys will
thinking-
do, or?
I'm thinking of, I'll probably give a brief overview, but when they start talking about like very specific questions that will inevitably come up, I don't,
Yeah, so more of like a question answer
Yeah.
type situation.
It's
Yeah,
not
yeah,
really a
yeah, I think that's, yeah, we can certainly be there for that question answer thing
Mhm.
on there.
Is the committee
And I-
okay with that, or?
That sounds good.
Yeah. I think we've got,
It's a plan.
we've got our plan going forward from tonight. Yeah, we've got a couple things that we'll continue, those of us who can will continue looking a little bit to sort of validate that this model is doing what we wanted it to do.
Mhm.
I will send Matt a shape file with the protected open space. And Matt will see how that affects this whole,
We can
this
see that
whole thing.
applied on top of this.
Pardon?
Can we, it's gonna be applied on top of the data?
Well, Matt would use the data, the protected open space data, basically to sort of modify the calculations here.
Okay.
And then primarily how it affects it is, the effects that I'm worried about, that I want to make sure we understand is we've evaluated all these parcels with respect to their proximity to protected open space. And by adding more protected open space, proximity for some parcels may
Will
change.
change, yeah.
If anything, more parcels will have a closer proximity to protected open space. And so that will affect the scoring for for those parcels. Beyond that, I mean, there are a number of protected open space parcels which have been included in this analysis and maybe don't need to be, but that, there's no particular harm in that.
Right.
It's the effect of additional protected open space parcels on the scoring of other parcels. That as a result of adding open space, protected open space, these other parcels are closer than this analysis initially showed them to be.
The tier 1.1 may change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
More value, right?
yes, yeah, right, tier 1.1, those numbers will increase for some parcels. How that affects the overall scoring, my guess is the numbers won't change dramatically.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe bigger, if they're budding, then it might have a bigger impact because that's a 1.
Yeah,
on
it'll
there,
add,
so, but
it could add, let's see, the weight we assign to that is 3.
Yep.
So if something went from a 0 to a 1, that would add 3 points to its score.
which may be enough to bump it up to another category or another,
Yes.
on the symbology list. I guess the one thing I would just suggest is when you're doing the methodology review, call it that, if there's any questions or anything that comes up, if you would be able to send that before the next meeting, just so that we can take a look at it, and see. I'd rather have some time to look at the questions ahead of time than try to figure out them, at the meeting if possible.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so, right, so well before our next meeting, if you have any comments on or suggestions on the methodology, the sooner we can let Matt know about that, the better.
Yeah, it'd be easier for me. Like, I mean, I probably could answer it at the meeting, but if I know it ahead of time, I'll definitely be able to figure out the answer and have that ready for the meeting. So,
Mhm.
This is.
but hopefully there won't be any.
Yeah,
So this is, what meeting are you referencing now, Matt? So-
well, I guess the next one you were referencing, the Board of Selectmen, or were you talking?
So we're gonna have one more open space and recreation.
Yeah,
committee
that's the one
meeting.
that's the one I'm
Oh, you're
referencing.
gonna go to that. Oh, okay, okay.
Oh, did you want, do you want me, not want me at that one, or?
No, I
Okay.
won't show to all our meetings, Matt, because you're
Okay.
really very pleasant to have around. But I was just thinking, I mean, if you can do it, I mean, that's great, but I was just trying to be cognizant of, I know that we've already gone over our number of meetings already, so adding another open space and recreation committee meeting plus the select board meeting, that's 2 now. And I think it might be better to have you at the select board meeting personally, because it seems like this group has a good understanding of, what's going on and what needs to be done.
Okay,
But
I can check in
I'm
with-
not the final decision maker. It's just a suggestion.
yeah, I can check in with Trish about it. on
Yeah,
there
I can
and
see.
see.
Try and reach out about using LPA hours to cover that meeting. As
Okay,
well.
yeah, I mean, that's certainly an
work,
option as well, too, yeah.
Okay.
Send her.
I'm gonna say, I'm thinking that unless some surprises come up, I'm not expecting to see any dramatic changes in the results of this, here, so. Yeah, unless something surprising comes up, I don't see it as essential for Matt to attend the next open space committee meeting.
Okay,
And I will, in the meantime, we have what are called local planning assistance hours. I know that Grafton has a bunch available that we can use CMRPC staff time towards. So if I can get approval to use LPA hours for this, then I will do that. So I'll handle talking to staff and folks, getting comments, and I will handle following up with the LPA hours. Yeah, and we'll go from there.
sounds good.
Okay.
Just as a heads up, I'll be away next week and starting tomorrow. So if you send anything, it'll be a week before I get back to you about it. Just so you're not surprised.
Okay, so I don't have to rush to that shape file tomorrow.
No, you don't have to do it tomorrow or anything.
Perfect.
I'll just look for it on the 26th when I get back. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me and everything. And
Thank you for everything and for, your explanations of how this all works. Very, very helpful.
Yeah.
excellent.
work.
Thank you. Glad you like it.
Alright.
It was a fun project.
Yeah,
Yes.
you did a good job. Thanks, Matt. And we'll be in touch. You'll be
Okay,
hearing from me. Alrighty.
sounds great. Have a good one.
See ya.
You too.
Bye.
Dave,
Yeah.
did you need me for anything else?
No, I think we are basically done. The only thing left on our agenda would be to review the minutes of the previous meeting, which we don't have, so.
So it's, yep.
I think the next item on our agenda would be to adjourn the meeting.
Fiona, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank
Fiona.
Thank
helping.
you. This was great. I'm really happy with the progress and thank you all for your time and attention to this and staying dedicated. So looking forward to seeing the results of our internal tests. Alrighty, see ya. Have a good night.
Thanks. All right. At this point, I think the chair would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I will make a motion to adjourn.
I will second that motion.
Moved and seconded that this meeting be adjourned. Stephen,
Yes, Stevens.
Shannon,
Aye.
Trevor,
Aye.
and Dave votes aye. Motion carried unanimously. We are adjourned.